The sedans are back, or at least that is what the market buzz will have you believe. But is it really the case? Because come to think of it, the volumes and the growth still rest with the crossovers. Having said that, the sedan segment has definitely been revitalized because it was always the Honda City as a de facto name in the category, but with the introduction of the Skoda Slavia, the Volkswagen Virtus, and more recently the Hyundai Verna, things have become a lot more exciting. And what we have here, the two cars that you see behind me, it's a tale of two turbos. The 1.5 TSI in the Volkswagen Virtus and the 1.5 GDI in the Hyundai Verna. These are classic examples of what small capacity turbo engines can do. So, let the story begin. Design, of course, is a subjective matter and you can make up your mind on which car do you like more. But to my eye, the Volkswagen Virtus has a more balanced approach. It looks better on the road, it has more pleasing proportions, and also the overall design execution is a lot more pleasant. There are no unnecessary design highlights that kind of stick out to the eye. But that is what the Hyundai Verna is all about. It's all very bold and radical. It's got unnecessary sort of details going on. And in that process, it's of course bold, no doubt about it, but it's also controversial and polarizing. The front end of the Virtus is very plain Jane, but at the same time, it's also very attractive in its own unique way. There is nothing jarring about it, nothing that sticks to your eye in an offensive manner at all. But it is the rear end which is a lot more characterful. There are these layers that give it the complexity, but also a slight hint of beauty. Contrasting to the design theme of the Virtus is the Hyundai Verna. This thing is a bit radical in approach, and of course the front end is dominated by this running LED strip all across the front end. It is no doubt striking, it is going to catch your eye instantly, but it is also a little gimmicky in feel. And then of course is the rest of the treatment of the front end, which is kind of exaggerated by the headlamp housing, and also there are many themes and many layers going on. So yeah, not as harmonious a design execution as the Virtus, but I guess it has its appeal. But as you move to the rear, the car starts to make a lot more sense, and it is again in this case the rear end of the car which is a lot more characterful. There are a couple of things which I'm not really a great fan of. For example, the knurled finish at the bottom, that kind of looks a little oblique and not as pleasing, but overall the design execution of the rear or the Verna is also a lot better than what it is essentially at the front end. Inside, it is neck and neck between the two cars. The Verna might just have a slight advantage, but that is not to say that the Virtus is not worthy. But there is a caveat over here. Volkswagen has brought some great products in India and established a name for itself in terms of quality and robustness. Be it the Jetta or the Passat in the past, or later the Polo and the Vento, and then of course the Tiguan also followed. They all were excellently built cars with hardly any surface or cabin issues to complain about. You could literally feel manufacturing greatness in those cars. And that is what I miss in the present day mass market Volkswagens, that is the Virtus and the Tiguan. The feel of design and manufacturing sophistication is just not the same. Is the Virtus badly made? Not really. There are, of course, some iffy bits in the cabin, like for example, the center console is not really the last word in quality, but everything else, like the dashboard plastics, the door cards, and the way everything else is integrated into the cabin is pretty good, and it has even got a sense of robustness to it. But what I'm trying to say is that there is not a lot of suave personality in this one as much as there used to be in the older cars. It is a very straightforward design in here, and there is nothing flashy other than, of course, this red outline that you get on the dashboard. A lot of people that I've spoken to seem to like it, but I still think that a more conservative charcoal or dark silver treatment would look even better. In fact, it may even give the cabin the air of class that is associated with Volkswagens. The rest of the things in the cabin par for the course really. There is a digital instrument screen right in front of the driver which gives you different display formats for the main readout, and the touch sensitive screen in the center, that is also very good with decent response time. The air conditioning works just well, and you get the expected features, of course, like the whole suite of connected car technology. You have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay and stuff like that, and then there is wireless charging on offer as well. Seats, well, the fronts are ventilated, so that's big marks over there, and the space is also sufficiently decent, and 4 fully grown adults are not going to mind sitting in the cabin at all. But one thing that I've had an issue with is the maximum upright level of the front seats. I like to sit fairly upright with just a slight hint of an angle to the seat back, but still you can call it pretty upright. And the Virtus does not give me that ideal position that I want, and that's a bit bizarre because any other car I could have gone very upright the way I like it, but not in this one. So whoever is a supplier of the seats maybe thought that all people sit reclining their backs a bit, and that's not all that great. But otherwise, the seats are quite good and fairly comfortable enough. But it is what is under the bonnet that this feature is all about, so let's focus on that. The 1.5 TSI engine in the Virtus is not all new. This EA211 Evo engine builds on the legacy of being very tractable and exciting at the same time, in the right application that is. Volkswagen did not share any detail about the turbo itself, but a little digging led us to the tech bits, of course. Most likely it is the TD04 model from MHI's catalog, and it is the one that is designed to fit to 1.5-litre petrol engines. The maximum rotation of the turbocharger is 190,000 RPM, and it works on a compression pressure of 2.9 to 3, which means the exhaust pressure is to the tune of 3 times the inlet pressure. The turbocharging results in this 1.5-litre engine making 150 PS at 5000 RPM and 250 Newton meters at 1600 RPM. Both figures, especially for a car that weighs a little less than 1300 kilos, is quite good. The gearing is great and the performance flexibility with the Virtus is commendable. The gearbox also feels eager, and it is quite an entertaining thing to move up and down the ratios with forced inputs on the paddles. You will of course have to be in the shift range while going up and down the gears, but when you are, it is an absolute joy of a transmission to operate. I prefer to keep the engine ticking between 2500 to 4000 RPM to get the best in form of excitement out of it, and I downshift when the rev needle falls down to 2000 or 2200 RPM. Using the engine this way has given me the most satisfaction and the most joy. There is a great solid performance spectrum to explore, and the sounds from the engine are also pleasing to the eardrums. On the handling front, Volkswagen has clearly chosen to give preference to ride quality over directional dynamics, but it's not a deal breaker at all. The Virtus is still among the most well-rounded packages that is also a reasonable fun-to-drive car. Does it exhibit load transfer? Of course it does, but that is also a cool thing because your senses are alive and you can feel the car's reactions to your inputs. But how is it compared to the Verna? Let's answer that by hopping into that car. The Verna is a fair bit different to the Virtus. You would think that because the two cars are 1.5-litre turbo engine cars, they both belong to the same category as well, that they will be very similar. But they're not. I've driven all the generations of the Verna, and it has come a long way. From being a soft, almost uninspiring experience, it has become a stylish option with its fluidic design philosophy for those who got bored of the Honda City. But dynamically, it was never as good as the rivals in the segment. In its latest form, the Verna pushes the design and style envelope even more, but mechanically it is still somewhat soft. It's almost similar to the Virtus in some ways. It is not that Hyundai has done exceptionally well when it comes to driving dynamics, it's that Volkswagen has toned itself down a fair bit. That is why the two are so close. The engines. Hyundai has had a history of doing strong engines. It used to be the diesel still a few years back, especially the 1.6 litre turbo diesel. That was an absolute gem. But even the more modern petrol engines are pretty impressive. And this, which is a 1.5 GDI, is a fine example of that. A Garrett turbocharger finds its way onto the exhaust manifold of the Verna's engine, and in terms of numbers, it's slightly better than the Virtus. This one's about 160 PS at 5,500 RPM and 253 Newton meters at 1,500 RPM. So that's about 10 PS and 3 Newton meter more than the Virtus. The peak power is at 500 RPM higher, but the peak torque is 100 RPM lower. So it's a game of almost equal firepower. I guess the top-end performance of the Verna may very slightly be a little better than the Virtus, and you might get a better top speed figure, but it's hardly going to be a difference worth celebrating with great excitement. The Verna is also not as progressively entertaining as the Virtus. It feels a bit less connected through the steering wheel, the suspension compression is not always linear, and it can step out abruptly when you start pushing it a little bit. It can get nervously excited, no doubt about it, but the confidence on the springs that the Virtus has just makes it a lot friendlier to drive aggressively. The gearbox as well, the Verna's 7-speed DCT that we have here, it's nowhere near as crisp and in sync with the engine speeds. But the thing is, the Verna is a lot more loaded. It gets powered seats while the Virtus is all manual. This also gets ADAS features, and its infotainment system is a lot slicker, it's more intuitive to use, and it is a little, only very slightly though, more spacious. But the Virtus gets all that you really need, and it is a perfectly good car. More to the point of this comparison, as a tool to drive enthusiastically, the Virtus is a better car.